versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Movie versus Movie. Today, we have what might be the best episode we have ever recorded. Patrick, what are the movies that we're doing today?
We are talking about two American classics, maybe.
Blue-collar American classics, summer fun, popcorn films.
Hot Rod and Joe Dirt.
I have to say, so I watched Joe Dirt more recently.
Same.
It's wild. I can't wait to talk to you about it.
Had you never seen it? Was this your first time?
I had seen it before. It was kind of weird because it's like one of those things where like it happened long enough ago that the memory box was sealed. And then when I started watching it, especially when he is like sleeping with who might be his sister, I was like, I remember this. I remember this movie.
Yeah, I had watched it in recent memory. I had forgotten that I had watched it in recent memory, and Aaron, my partner, reminded me. Mm-hmm. We watched it during COVID.
What brought you guys to that point where you were like, "This is a good Joe Dirt is the."
It was our low. Clearly,
Yeah,
I think Aaron picked it. I think it's like
it has mass appeal.
Somewhat, Aaron. I feel like it was a movie Aaron had fond memories of.
Yeah.
And what we did at the time, it was me, Aaron, and our friend Jamie was our roommate. And I think it was we were doing movie nights where we'd rotate who picks the movie. And so for Jamie, it would be a movie like Doubt.
Yeah, right.
And then for me, it would be, what did I pick? I picked like The Apartment and Memories of Murder, the Korean serial killer movie. Yeah. And then Aaron picked Joe Dirt, which is great.
Very on brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't we start with, do we want to start with Joe Dirt or do we want to start with Hot Rod?
Let's do Joe Dirt. It's fresh on our minds. We got a lot to say about it.
Yeah. So this is the thing about Joe Dirt, which I didn't quite remember, but it is Forrest Gump.
It's Forrest Gump.
It's Forrest Gump.
It's Forrest Gump. Yeah.
It's Forrest Gump.
Except for a series, rather than a series of kind strangers on a park bench, it's Dennis Miller.
Yeah, being awful to him.
Yeah. And the thing that immediately I clocked in the movie and compared how it contrasts from Hot Rod is like, in Hot Rod, Joe Dirt, it's like never exactly clear like who the joke is on.
Yeah.
You know, like comedy is like all about like perspective, and like you can do, like you can get away with pushing the boundary on stuff if it's clear like who the butt of the joke is.
Yeah.
And Joe Dirt, like with the shock jock character at the end, I was like, are we supposed to think he's cool? Like, are we supposed to like him? Is that just the era we were in where that was like cool?
I think that, so, because the theme that we have picked for these is like hometown hero, blue collar classic.
Kind of lovable losers.
Yeah. And one thing I will say about both of these movies is that they come out of the SNL sort of ethos.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the 90s or whenever like Adam Sandler was like king of SNL or whatever, they really fine-tuned, like with Animal House and like all of the Adam Sandler movies that came out after, and like a lot of the John Belushi movies too. And oh crap, who's the guy who's in the van down by the river?
Chris Farley.
Yeah, Chris Farley.
Yeah.
So all of them have these personas, and like it's pretty dialed in that it's like lovable loser, like idiot with a heart of gold.
Yeah.
And it's always kind of like we hold these people up as in their movies as like these are the good guys, and also they get these women that are far outside their leagues. They always end up super well, you know, like. So I think that this is in that tradition. So I think that we are supposed to be like, you know what, Joe Dirt's a cool guy. Like he's cool.
Yeah.
Which I think. Well, why don't we start at the beginning?
Yeah. Let's just dive in.
So Joe Dirt begins with us seeing Joe Dirt in his like really shitty car as he drives to work
Yeah.
And we see him immediately. He's like giving himself a pep talk in the mirror. He's like, "You're not a loser. You're great. You're doing a great job." Goes out immediately, essentially gets assaulted by his coworkers.
Yeah. Again, and just presented as normal. Like
Yeah.
you go to work and you insult the janitor for how they look.
Yeah, they're like, "Yeah, you're gonna fucking like scrub the floors, you fucking idiot," and like push him into a garbage can, like. And here's the thing I will say about Joe Dirt is that I would be way more on Joe Dirt's side through most of the movie if I've been having a lot of really bad luck lately. I've been watching a lot of movies from the 2000s, and I'm just
is
like,
it bad luck?
It's just
Is this a choice you're making?
it's a choice I'm making. I'm revisiting. Like I revisited Forgetting Sarah Marshall to be like,
Yeah.
is this still a good movie? Because all I remembered was the Dracula Muppet scene, like
Right.
the musical he writes,
Which
which is still holds up, fucking
Right.
great. I
That
would see
should
a
win-
whole movie.
Should have given
of
that the Oscar. Best Picture. Just the Muppet.
That's
music.
short. This
Yeah.
one scene. But the thing is that like he's terrible. Same with Scott Pilgrim. I rewatched that. And I'm like, oh fuck. Like I don't like this movie as much either. Like I keep going, and we saw Garden State, and we were like, holy shit, this is a fucking terrible movie. This movie, I would say, really does not benefit from the fact that culturally, all of these characters are homophobic. They use
Yeah.
the R word quite a bit. There's just like a lot of shit in there. And if they had just like not done that, I feel like this movie would have held up. Am I crazy?
No, I don't think so. Because Joe, he's pretty wholesome, even
Yeah.
compared to like some of the like Adam Sandler types. Like he doesn't really have like the Adam Sandler whole thing has a dark edge to it, where he
Yeah.
has like the rage and
Yeah.
stuff. And Joe Dirt is like generally like a pretty. This comes off as like pretty sweet. But yeah, it's just homophobic. He's like the character's homophobic and the movie's homophobic,
Yes.
and it's
Yes.
constant. It just keeps coming back.
Yeah. It's like I've never heard a movie say like queer as an identifier so many times. Like, you queer, like what the fuck? Like, where did that come from? And which is also funny because I did a little research afterwards, and apparently there was going to be a children's cartoon, Joe Dirt, that they like an animated kids cartoon or something, and like a bunch of other things on the docket that never got made, thankfully. But I was like, what a wild branding that would have been. But yeah, so he's kind of like this down on his luck loser, gets assaulted by his coworkers, and then he kind of wanders into a active like this guy is like, oh, you're the janitor, right? Like, you look fucking crazy, because he has this huge mullet.
Right.
And he's like, why don't you come with me? I think I know someone who's going to want to meet you. Brings him into the shock jock guy, who apparently is this actor is he actually a radio guy, or?
He's it's Dennis Miller. He was on Saturday Night Live as, I don't know if he acted. I think he was mainly like a Weekend Update guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if he probably had a radio show, and then he like, this is from memory, he was on that just kind of like sarcastic, caustic. That was his personality. And then he kind of pivoted into politics as like a conservative guy.
Yeah, he's
so
like
then
a
I
piece
think
of
he
shit
was
now,
on conservative TV and maybe talk radio too, probably on talk radio too.
And you can feel it from this. Like again, this is another thing. Joe Dirt is not an idiot as a character. Like, he is an idiot, but he's not smart.
Right.
And so the way people talk to him is insane. Like, the shock jock's like, oh, you're like the worst fucking specimen of humanity that I've ever seen. You're a piece of shit. Like, come down, sit with me, and talk with me. And he's like, okay. It's like, what a forced framing device. But yeah, so then they start talking about like the saga of Joe Dirt, and like Joe just starts running through his history and kind of telling the story of his life, which is wild.
Yeah.
Do you want to start at the beginning, and we'll kind of go through the big pieces of his life?
He was born missing a part of his skull.
Yes.
So his brain was exposed.
Yes.
And so his mom put a wig on his head.
A mullet wig. Like an adult mullet wig.
But then fused to his skull.
Yes.
So it cannot come off. So that's the origin of his haircut.
Can I also, we have to like put a pin in this, the final scene of the movie with his hair. we gotta talk about it at some point, but maybe it's not now.
We'll get to it. Yeah. And then when he was 8 or 11 years old, they went to the Grand Canyon.
He was 8, yeah.
8. and
his parents
he lost his parents.
Yeah, his parents disappeared. And so for the rest of the movie and for the rest of the story, it's like Forrest Gump in that he is looking for his parents, and he's telling the story about how he grew up from an 8-year-old at the Grand Canyon to this sort of like feral person that has had these adventures.
It really is Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
That must have been pretty intentional, because it's not that. I mean, I feel like it's recent enough to Forrest Gump that people would pick up on it, because it's the same structure where he's telling the story.
It was made in like 2006, so it's post Gump.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was earlier than
Maybe
that was like
2001. It might be 2001.
But it, because then it catches up, the story catches up to where he's telling the story.
And then we get kind of an ending.
Goes out into the world.
So he kind of grows up. We get to see him basically like surviving on his own in like national parks as like a young 8-year-old, and then smash cut, he's like 14 and fully David Spade. And he sort of like wanders, and he's been like stealing from people for money to survive. And he goes and meets what will become his love interest, Brandy, at her family farm. Now, some things to say about this scene. One, very hard to watch because there's a dog whose ball sack gets frozen to a porch, and it keeps trying to like get out, and so it just shows the ball stretching as this dog tries to escape, and it looks like it was made out of gum. It's horrifying.
Someone wrote that in a screenplay,
and they're like, fuck,
and then it went through multiple rounds of drafts,
and they're like, can we make this like longer, this scene, because it's like we see it many times. Which
long.
Is the first thing this is the first example of, did you find the jokes in this movie funny?
There are some jokes in the movie that I genuinely find funny and laughed out loud at. I think, you can get to it later. I think there's one.
Is it Gert T. Frobe?
Damn, you beat me to it. That is the fun. I think that whole, if we're just going to jump ahead or just to.
Christopher Walken in this movie deserves an Oscar.
Oh, he's the best.
So
the best
good
actor in the movie and the funniest part. And the best.
You're talking to my friend all wrong. His little speech is so good. You talk to him like that again, I'm going to stab you in the eye with a curling iron.
I love, because that's the thing. The whole setup of the movie is like the structure of the movie allows them to just like create these vignettes,
these character pieces.
And so like you would have to think that David Spade and whoever the other writer of the movie was, like, they're making a Hollywood movie. They're gonna they want to put the best, and it doesn't really have to make sense in the narrative. So they're like, you're gonna put your best bits in this movie theoretically. And like, dog balls on porch is apparently one of them.
and also this kind of is a place of commonality between the two movies, is that these feel like a string of sketches that somebody sort of like sew together into a movie. And so he has this dog. He meets this very beautiful woman named Brandy, and then they become very good friends. And they live like years on her farm. He keeps visiting her. They become very, very close. It's pretty clear that Brandy is like sort of interested in Joe for more, but Joe's kind of oblivious, but it's like, who would love Joe? And there's this group of hooligans led by Kid Rock. Are you fucking kidding me? Like Kid Rock in his debut acting
I wonder like how many people in this movie like later on were at the RNC at some point.
How many were at January 6th?
Dennis Miller, Kid Rock. There's probably a couple more in there. I think Chris Farley's brother plays the cop at the end, and I think he's also like I could be wrong. I don't want to slander Kevin Farley, but I think he might be a conservative guy too.
Damn.
Anyways, but not to keep interrupting. The strange thing about this movie is it's not like, thinking back to like the perspective on the joke is like, it's David Spade who his like whole persona is like sarcastic, coy, like in movies and in like SNL.
This was a very big departure for him.
Yeah.
Because I would say earnest is like the core.
Playing very
thing.
earnest.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know. I guess I'd have to look up where he's from. David Spade feels like he's from like California, but he might not be. He might be from the Midwest or whatever. But just like to play like heartland American, kind of endearingly, like those parts of Joe Dirt, like they're not really making fun of him.
Yeah.
I don't think for those parts. So it's just I'm like, where does this come from for David Spade?
Yeah, and then there are also times where I was like, oh, this movie's like pretty smart setting up a joke, and then the movie will be like, that was a joke, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
I already knew that. Like there's so that like basically the next thing is he gets like kicked out. Essentially, keeps going to find his parents, and a meteorite falls from space near him, and he's like, whoa, and he starts having this sort of like weird relationship with this meteorite where he's like pulling it around on a wagon, and he's sort of like, I love you, meteorite, where it's just you and I against the world and all that kind of stuff. We see him sort of like planning with the meteorite. He's eating his like fast food off it and all that. We find out in the very next scene that it is basically when a plane flew overhead, it ejected all of the shit that had been carrying from the like lavatory, and it in its descent sort of froze solid and then got set on fire and then landed. And so he's been eating off of and like talking to this huge lump of shit, which is, stupid. But then there's a character that goes, ew, he ate off that. And I was like, yeah, we just saw that. Like, we can get this. This is the joke.
Yeah. And I think that has a genuinely funny line where the guy's like, see that peanut there? That's how you
dead
know.
giveaway.
And he's like, no, that's a space peanut.
Yeah.
See, that's fun. But yeah, and too, it also betrays this thing that doesn't make any sense in the movie where he's like clearly sitting in this room telling stories and we're seeing them.
Yeah.
And then the people in the room react to things that he wouldn't communicate through, like, I guess in the story
That
he
is
said
so
specifically,
true.
I ate off it. Or they're like, Brandy's so hot, dude.
Yeah.
And you're like, you haven't seen her. You just talked about her.
Dennis Miller is his name.
Yeah.
Dennis Miller at one point is like, but Brandy's ass though, pretty crazy, that ass. And it's like, he's literally just talking to you, dude. You have never seen this person. And I don't like, it is not in character for Joe Dirt to be like, and her ass was sculpted out of granite or whatever. Like,
Right.
it wasn't like, it's not part of the movie.
Right.
It's just sort of like a mistake that the writers
Right.
made.
It's so weird because he doesn't know. Like, he also doesn't realize that Brandy's into him too. So
Yeah, and so
it's
like
weird.
it seems like in a strange way, much like Forrest Gump, I would say, in that us, the audience, is expected to pick up more than what Joe picks up from situations.
Yeah.
And so it is interesting that he is obviously not telling these things in such a way that we are supposed to be able to pick these things out, because he doesn't. So it is kind of a weird breaking of the format there, but who cares?
Yeah.
So we keep moving. And what does he do after this? He finds a job at the carnival. Is that the next thing?
Well, does the balloon happen before that? That's how he
shit.
That's how he gets out of, because the dog dies, which we don't have to go into too much about that.
That was very strange. And
very
like,
strange.
But
And
also
then-
another thing that like I thought was just a stupid joke, but then actually becomes a plot point later, is that like Brandy's father is trapped on a train track. His like foot gets caught and he's about to get run over by a train. And he's go Charlie, or whatever the dog's name is, like go find family, like go get help. And you see the dog running and then like having sex with another dog and then showing up at David Spade and those guys. Which is like, oh, this is just kind of a weird joke. But then later on, it's like very much a plot point, which I think is very silly. I can't tell if this movie thinks highly or lowly, I guess, of their audience.
Just that
like,
tight screenplay.
Yeah,
no wasted moments.
Did they think that they're like, yeah, the audience, we're gonna plant this so that later it's a payoff, or are they saying like, yeah, the audience is stupid, so
They're like, oh, it's convenient.
we have to tell them everything. Yeah, so he goes and he starts working for a dentist or whatever by basically being a costume mascot.
Right.
And he meets this woman who has a Hemi, like a nice car, I guess. I'm not really sure what a Hemi is.
I think it's a type of engine.
Oh, gotcha.
I don't know.
And so like he's talking with this woman and she's like, yeah, it was my late husband's. And he's like, I'm so sorry. And she's like, don't be, I killed him, which I thought was funny.
That was good.
It was good.
It was a funny joke.
And she was like, yeah, he was a piece of shit. Like he was terrible. And then he's like, oh, good for you. So like this movie does have good moments. But he buys this car and then, because the woman's very nice. And also she's like, you got to get yourself a sketch artist, like a criminal sketch artist to do a portrait of your folks so you can find them. Then somehow like a storm comes in and there's a fully operational hot air balloon on the top of this store that he climbs into accidentally, and it takes off and he's literally just like floating in the air. And I was like, Patrick, at this point, I felt so like I was on drugs. I was like, what is this? Why? Because it's like green screen of him in the air. And then you see like a plane passing by and they're like, oh, do you see that giant tooth? Yeah, I see that giant tooth. And he's like, finally, someone's going to get like help, like wave, help. And then it cuts to the cockpit and the pilots are just mooning Joe Dirt. And I'm like, what is happening? What is happening in this movie? This is the reaction that these people have.
That's what it's, I think, better than other parts when it's like leaning into just
being absurd. Yeah, just surreal, right?
Yeah. So, but yeah, then he lands. That's when he lands in the desert, right? Is that when he ends up at the fireworks stand?
Yeah,
with his friend.
Which was what was it, like Kickin' Chicken or something?
Kicking Wing.
And I was sort of like, I couldn't tell whether I was like, do I feel offended? I don't know. He seems like they didn't really do like a crazy stereotype, I don't think. But he also like the name and also like, I don't know. I just didn't know how I felt about it. And it was sort of like a nonsense scene. Like, I want to get your take on it. What did you think of that whole thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was like fine.
Yeah.
Because he kind of like, well, he said he asks him to help track his parents.
Yeah.
And he's like,
I don't make enough money doing that.
And also I want to be a veterinarian.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't really like come up again. So I'm like, I think it's fine. The name, isn't great, but I feel like he's at least a character who has like wants and desires.
Yeah. Basically, but this whole scene, which otherwise doesn't really like, it's very silly, but he's teaching him the value of dangerous fireworks.
Right. And he lists all the fireworks.
Yeah.
Husker do's, Husker don'ts.
Which is, again, lists are funny, man. Lists are funny.
Lists are good.
And then we show up and he trips and he has tripped over what seems to be an atom bomb.
Yeah.
Like it's a bomb in the desert. And then they're like, oh shit. And so then they fire Roman.
They reference Los Alamos, which is funny. Oppenheimer crossover.
Yeah, they do. And he's like, oh, let's fire
Roman candle.
Yeah, Roman candle at it. And they do, and it fucking explodes like a nuclear bomb.
I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, and then
it's the archival footage, and you just hear Joe Dirt over it being like, ooh, hell yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. And then he like looks over at his friend who just like vaporizes in front of him, and he's like, no, and then he wakes up, but then you see that there is a bomb that they've just tripped over, and Joe Dirt's like, all right, let's not shoot shit at it, let's do something else. And so they pack it up and then they drive away.
Right.
So then the next thing we see is that he's driving the bomb in the car with his friend, and it's just like leaning up against the back, and it's kind of silly. There's this huge bomb and they're driving it down the highway. The very next like part of this, or I guess the end of the scene, is that they're in a bank, and maybe not a bank. It was like the National Park Archive or something.
Right, because he's trying to get the pictures.
Yeah, he's trying to get like a list of people that were at the Grand Canyon on the day, so that he can find one of them and see if they have any pictures of him and his family, so he can find them. And he strapped the nuclear bomb to his back, and he's like standing on. He's like, hey, if anybody does anything stupid, I knock this bomb and we all blow up. So just give me the records or whatever. And then like somebody comes over and is like, oh, it's just like, this ain't a bomb, it's like a shit canister or something. And they knock off the top, and then it's just like 2 minutes of Joe Dirt getting covered in shit from this whole thing, which, when we were talking a little bit off air about this, is the exact same joke as the meteorite.
Yeah.
It's like poop gross, right?
Yeah. It's like Joe Dirt thinks it's one thing, actually it poop.
Yeah, it's poop.
Sorry, but then they only do it twice.
Yes.
Which you gotta do rule of three.
You gotta do it one more time.
Something else be poop.
Yeah, like maybe a car turns out to be poop. I don't know. This is what writers are for. But the thing is too, is that it's kind of funny because the guys, like, I didn't I actually was very grossed out by this scene because it is like sludge that comes out of this stuff.
It
It's
looks like
gross.
soft serve chocolate
Yeah.
ice cream.
Yeah. And the police are like, "Do we arrest him?" And he's like, "Well, nah, he's paid his price." And he's like literally just covered in shit. And so he finds, and they like just give him the names, and he goes.
Yeah.
And Kick and Wing leaves to go become a fireworks oligarch, but also like a veterinarian maybe. And they like have a nice little hug. They leave. This is the part where it's like, this is where it starts being like really bad for me, is they hug, and Joe Dirt's sort of like I'm not like that though. Like I'm not fucking gay. Yeah. And it's like, what are you talking about? He gave you a hug.
And they have like a genuine friendship.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like
a
they're
nice
nice.
relationship.
And this is throughout the entire movie, which is where it just really doesn't hold up, is that every single time two men are on screen, it's like, oh, are you gay? Well, I'm not gay. You want to fight about being gay? It's like so stupid. And we're actually coming up to the part where like I think it really leans into it a little bit, where they go to Buffalo Bob.
Yeah.
And so they go this guy.
Speaking of movies we've covered before.
I know, right?
Crossover.
Yeah, and it's just Silence of the Lambs reference talking about Buffalo
there's
Bill.
Not really any like joke. There's like barely a joke to it, other than that like it happens to
It's
Joe
just
Dirt.
and like you said, there's not really a joke there, except for it's like Joe Dirt like heckling Buffalo Bob being an idiot when Buffalo Bob is trying to kill him, kind of thing. And it's sort of like, oh, Joe Dirt's stupid, blah blah
Just
blah.
kind of
They give him
oblivious.
they give him an auto trader and he's happy and all that kind of stuff. But then for the rest of the movie, characters are like, so like I heard what happened with Buffalo Bob, and he's like, nothing happened. And it's just like trying to like just bring that up as a joke over and over again. This is the most disappointing thing about this movie, is that none of those jokes are needed, nor are they real. Nor are they even like funny.
Yeah,
You know.
I agree.
And I think that this movie would have held up like to a point where you could watch it still if this stuff wasn't in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is just such a bummer because it's not additive, but it is like to the point where it's a core part of the movie's identity, which kind of sucks.
It just kind of dates it.
Yeah.
It just reminds you.
Like there's this joke that's like his catchphrase where he's like, oh, you think I'm queer? You think I'm queer? Okay, well then check out this puppy. And he's like flexing or whatever. And he's like like tapping his guns. And he's sort of like, check out this puppy. Check out this puppy. You think they're queer? You wanna like dance about it? And it's like, okay, sure. You're trying to set up a franchise, I guess. But like this is what you want to be the thing that survives the test of time. Stupid. But yeah, he gets saved and they bring him out, and then he just kind of keeps going. Is there anything that like meaningful that happens after that?
It's hard to remember like what actually drives each part of the plot. The only thing I think we met at some point, he does get the sketches from the sketch artist,
But he's high.
I don't remember why. Oh, he goes into the house. Yeah, it's getting
fumigated. Yeah.
And then because he thinks it's a carnival, and then he gets the sketches. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
He's like, I guess I didn't describe him very good because my dad looks like Father Time and my mom looks like Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
That's like pretty funny. And then the next part is that he's like sort of like relocated to this other town where he is looking for like another group of people to like try to get these like photos, and he finds Christopher Walken, who is by far the best part of this movie.
Yeah. Just head and shoulders above. This is the best like little bit and best performance, because it is funny because he ends up in Louisiana for some reason.
Yeah.
Does he already worked at the Gator Farm, or does that come after?
That comes after,
Okay.
but yeah, that's
So yeah, he goes to gets the job at the school as a janitor, and then Christopher Walken is the other janitor, but it's clear that he's a New York mobster and witness protection.
Yeah,
But
he's like he talks like it.
he's like, where are you from? He's like, New York. I mean,
Kansas.
Kansas.
New York, Kansas.
And his but yeah, you basically get the whole thing where Joe Dirt gets bullied by all the kids, and they all throw food at him.
I want to talk about this,
Okay.
because there are multiple parts in this movie where like very attractive women are introduced to be sort of like either for him to fall down in front of and just be embarrassed, or to eventually
love him.
Yeah, love him.
Well, yeah, because the first thing when he's doing the radio, the first people they show listening to it is like a sorority.
Yeah.
With like super like hot sorority girls.
Yeah, like skimpy outfits
And
at
then,
home or whatever.
yeah, you get to school and there's like the hot teacher who's trying to.
But this is the thing about the hot teacher. She has like one line, which is like, hey, or something very innocuous, nothing really to do with like building a character. And then he's like trying to impress her, and these kids just start bullying the shit out of him by like throwing like stuff at him and like calling him names. And she just stands and watches, and then he like walks away. We never see her again.
Right. It's really weird. It's not consistent.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, oh, hot women inexplicably have it out for Joe Dirt, but it's also not they all hate him. Because Jamie Presley is like enamored with him, and then obviously like Brandy likes him. But yeah, it's a strange thing.
Yeah.
I think it was just also in those movies, they were just like, we gotta put a couple babes in it to keep people interested.
Yeah, it's like kind of going back to that like SNL thing. It's like in any Adam Sandler movie, who was an executive producer, I should say.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, this like super rad hot babe is actually like there and is either super into the main character or is like an enemy of some kind or whatever. So yeah, there's this. He goes over and Christopher Walken gives like the great like speech, and he's like pretend threatening the fire hydrant, and he has this whole
he's
thing.
Like tap dancing down the hall.
Yeah, he's tap dancing. The amount of freedom they gave Christopher Walken, God, an actor's dream. He just is like being a goof, and then he like goes in, and it turns out that like the chemistry lab accidentally made mustard gas.
Yeah, that's
oh
funny
no, I've
too.
made mustard gas. I've doomed us all. It's so good. And then he pops and he saves all of them, but then he like essentially pins it on Joe Dirt who like Joe Dirt saved all of you, but he can't because he's a witness protection.
In that part, I don't know why that part just Christopher Walken's body language and how it's
really good.
When the kids are like, he saved us, and he's like, whoa, no, it was Joe Dirt. Joe Dirt saved you. I don't know.
It was just so funny.
So dynamic.
It was during the era where Christopher Walken had become a big joke, and he had embraced it.
Just putting him in your movie
made it funny.
Yeah.
And I will say in this case,
it works.
I was
curious
man.
to track the trajectory of it, because now you have like.
Now he's back in like Dune. He's like, Dune.
Right, but I think people like had a hard time with him in that movie.
Did your theater like? So I had a friend who went and saw Dune 2, and they were like, it felt as though everyone was waiting for like a Walkenism to come out of his mouth.
Yeah.
And when one finally did, everyone was like, like all kind of laughing at once. Did you experience that?
I don't remember there being a noticeable reaction to him in the movie, but I feel like just talking to people, they're like, that kind of like took me out of it, which I guess is unfortunate for him. I mean, he's had a good long career, but you're like just his mere presence.
But
now.
he can be fantastic. Have you ever seen Seven Psychopaths?
No, I didn't see that one.
We should do it eventually, because I really like him in that film. It's actually a pretty good film too. At least I remember it, but it's also one of those that were around like 2015 or whatever. So we'll see. But yeah, so Joe Dirt becomes a hero, and then being the good guy with a heart of gold, he's on TV and he's like, the real hero is this guy, and he
Clem.
Clem, and he like holds up a picture of his face, and he's like, also I'm trying to like find my family, blah blah blah. He basically tips off the mob that Clem is there, and we see a scene of these mobsters going in, and then gunshots and like a shadow kind of across the window as he is apparently killed, and we see his body being like taken out by the cops, and David Spade runs up and he's like sad. He's like, I'm so sorry, Clem. I didn't mean to. You're like my best friend. I'm so sorry. But at least you'll be with your wife now. That beautiful, beautiful wife. And starts like describing a person. And Clem gets a erection under the sheet that he's under because he's still alive. And he's like, hey, like, sorry, I didn't tell you, but I'm undercover. Maybe I'll go to that place where Brandy is.
Yeah.
And then he's kind of gone. But he suggested Joe goes somewhere. Do you know? Remember why?
Nope.
Yeah, it's gone.
I don't remember why, but I will say maybe we're not giving the screenwriters enough credit, because earlier we said the people in the radio station know what Brandy's butt looked like, but clearly in this scene, Joe's doing a very good job of describing his wife's physical appearance. So maybe he just is a very, eloquent.
He's like like a Hemingway.
Yeah.
He's like few words but very descriptive.
We're not giving him credit.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to remember where
the next scene is the Gator Farm, right?
Is it? Probably.
Because he like moves
we'll say
on.
It's a Gator Farm.
Yeah. He moves on. And he's like, okay, I'm going to the next thing, and he gets a job at this Gator Farm, and the woman who runs it is just like, if I could find like a wonderful man, then I'd shut down this bizarre. Hey, gators! And she's like screaming at the thing about how much she hates crocodiles, because like crocodiles ate her husband or something.
I think so.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. And at first I was like, oh, is this like another like an older woman hitting on like Joe Dirt?
Right.
But then it doesn't really end up like that. He goes and does the show and just gets fucking destroyed by an alligator, which is like physical comedy, pretty good.
Yeah.
Nothing to write home about, but still pretty funny. And so he does that, but then he gets hurt because he was almost eaten by a crocodile, and something else happens that like the Gator Farm gets shut down, I guess. Again, this is the thing about these movies, especially like the Gump kind of story ones, is that they're very loosely connected, and I really can't get us from scene to scene. Like the scenes stick out in my mind,
hard,
but it's like very like MacGuffin of, and then he has to go do this thing over here. You know what I mean?
It's hard to remember. I literally watched it last night.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I can't remember the order of operations. Because then is that Carnival after that? With Jamie
I think
Presley?
the Carnival is after that. And do you want to describe this one?
Yeah, sure. So he's working at the Carnival at a game where you have to try to flip coins into the little dishes.
He's spraying down.
He's spraying them with Pam. And Jamie Presley shows up and is immediately...
There's immediate chemistry.
Immediate chemistry. And that kind of becomes the bit of this like spotting each other across the crowd and like doing increasingly sexual gestures to each other, which is kind of fun. I feel like Jamie Presley does a great job at that. And then there is a funny bit here because he offers to this is when he offers to take her out. He says, I got a Hemi.
Yeah.
He tries to go get his car. It's been towed
and
however long
impounded
ago.
for like $2,500.
Yeah, he can't afford it. So he says, what can I buy with this? And then that comes full circle back. He gets his shitty car from the beginning.
And he sort of like billed himself to this woman as like, I'm an outlaw. I'm with these carnies because I'm an outlaw.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he goes and picks her up and then takes her back to the Carnival for a date. Which is
and
funny.
she's like, didn't you say you had a Hemi? And he's like, yeah, I stole this car.
Yeah. And then she's like,
stupid.
It's kind of weird that he took me on a date to the place I was earlier today.
But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. But then they go back to her place and they're telling a story about each other.
Yeah.
Wait, do they have sex first?
No, it's sort of like
order of operations.
they're sort of like making out.
He realizes it.
Yeah.
She talks about going to the Grand Canyon, and then it clicks in his head.
And he's like, "Oh shit!" But she had a brother.
She's my sister, but he doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
And then they have sex, and then
No, he does say something.
I thought he waits until after. I thought
no, because it's like getting hot and heavy, and then he's like, "I'm sorry, but like, there's a chance that you're my sister." And she's like, no, I couldn't be. My brother's like, whatever.
Yeah.
Name is what? Something. And then they do have sex, and they like try to, and he can't get it up. And then she's like, do you want me to pretend like I'm your sister?
Yeah.
And then they have sex, and then everyone on the radio station is like, ah! And he's like, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It's a cheap joke. It doesn't really do anything, but it's stupid. It's definitely sort of like a coastal elite writing like the inbred hick sort of thing.
I guess that's the like mean side of
It's like going back to what you said about like, is this movie celebrating this
like,
person, or like is
on?
this can't really tell.
Yeah. But then what? So then at that point he has the car. So then is it at that point?
Yeah, but then
Does
at
he
that
end up
point he
in
gets
LA?
a call from Brandy, who's like, your parents are dead, right? And then he's like,
Or no, does he? It's so hard to remember.
remember.
He calls and talks to Kid Rock.
Yeah, who's like, she already found your family.
Yeah, and said she didn't want to talk to you, basically.
Yeah. And so he kind of like breaks ties with her and goes, and that kind of catches us up to where we are. And the shock jock is like, why the fuck did Brandy betray you? Blah, 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 blah. And then they call Brandy, and Brandy's like, I'm sorry, Joe, but like, come home because your parents are dead, and like, come home and I can take care of you. And he's like, oh, they're dead. And then so like basically right away, somebody like in the next scene or something, they get a call in, and it's like, I'm Joe's mom, and I'm looking at his dad right now. And so they go, and he's become like this big media celebrity because of these the dirt files or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then they go meet the parents. It turns out that they're just like big pieces of shit.
Yeah, and they left him there on purpose.
Yeah, and that they're trying to like angle this like moment of fame to try to jumpstart their clown business of and like they have the big thing of like, you have a frown, look at a clown, or something like that. But yeah, so then he like gets mad at them and says like, I never want to see you again, and leaves. And it kind of just I kind of forget how it ends. He like goes back to Brandy, right? Or like what happens after that?
Or Brandy comes. No, then he's gonna jump off the bridge into the LA River.
Yeah.
And then Brandy shows up, and they're like, no, you can't come in here. And then she's like, but I'm Joe, it's Brandy. And then they're like, oh, you're the
Brandy.
And then they let her in, and then she says, Joe, I love you. And then they
he's like, oh, I won't jump. And then the cop throws the bungee lassos him, and he falls off the bridge
cord,
and then he like comes back up and crushes his head against the
thing. That's how it gets. So then we get to we get to him waking up, and who's in the room? Gert B. Frobe.
Yeah, who's Clem, who has been relocated with his new wife, who is the person who ran the Gator store or whatever.
Who has since lost middle and thumb, but still has her ring finger.
Yeah, and shows that they are now married and happy.
Yeah, Kicking Wing is there.
And he's become like a multimillionaire because of his fireworks stands.
Yeah, and then the big reveal. Brandy got him a wig that's a little more contemporary.
Yeah, because he got his head hit, so the mullet was like fucked up, and so they got a new wig to implant on his head, and it is full on dreadlocks. It's full on dreadlocks.
I can't tell if the movie knows, like, if the joke, what the joke is.
Yeah,
because from this perspective, it's very funny because you're like, yeah, 2001 was a time when white people had dreadlocks.
Yeah.
I mean, it still happens today, but
but it's also sort of like self-aware of like, this is not a style that's gonna last. But it doesn't. I don't think it's coming at it from the thing of like, white people shouldn't have dreadlocks.
I think it's more like, look at this dumb haircut that like kids have. You know, like I think, you know, they could have done like a mohawk too.
Yeah, and he's like super into it. He's like, fuck yeah, this is cool. He gets his Hemi. The dog that Brandy has is actually Charlie's like
Charlie
puppy.
2.
Charlie 2. Mm-hmm. I find that a little disconcerting that they just slap on a 2 onto a living being. But it's sort of like he finally has his family and his friends. Also, Christopher Walken's new name. I think we skip by this too fast. It's Gert B. Frobe, which I think is low key the funniest part of this movie. It's so funny. It's so stupid.
It's so dumb.
It's like clearly a fake name, but so good. And so then Kid Rock challenges him to a race, and Gert is like, well, you're talking to my guy all wrong, and does his speech again. And finally is able to do it to a person. Yeah, exactly. And so then Kid Rock kind of like gets nervous, and then they outrace him in the Hemi, and that's the end of Joe Dirt.
That is the end. I give Joe Dirt credit for getting in and out in a cool 90 minutes.
For real. Anymore, like the movie still felt long at points, but I felt as though we got from the beginning to the end in good time.
Yeah.
Like we said before, the the anti-gay stuff in there is hard to watch. They do use the R word a couple of times. It's sort of like you blame,
Yeah.
but
I think it's only bullies that call him that. At least give them that credit that it's not your protagonist and his love interest using it repeatedly in an endearing seeming way.
what kind of movie would ever do that?
I don't know. Don't look at did you see my Letterboxd review?
No, I didn't. Is this of Joe or of Garden State?
Well, it's relevant to both.
Okay.
Garden State, I gave 1 star. I don't know if I said anything about it. Hold on. Let me just see. This is important. And then Joe Dirt, I gave 1.5 star and said better than Garden State. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that this movie, it's stupid. It's definitely stupid.
It's really dumb. It doesn't. There are better movies of this genre and time period.
Yeah.
I think in general the Adam Sandler. I don't know how you feel about Adam Sandler. I always loved Adam Sandler growing up, and generally liked his movies. I haven't watched a lot of them recently.
Yeah,
but I think in like the Adam Sandler vehicles were always better than the Adam Sandler's buddies vehicles.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. I would also say like I'm just like not a real fan of like the man-child thing.
Yeah.
However, our next movie I think you're like there are other versions of this that do it better in the time period. Hot Rod is that movie.
It is.
And we'll talk about it right after this break.
Greetings, adventurers. I'm Max, and I compose background music and themes for tabletop games. Whether you're delving into Dungeons & Dragons, unraveling mysteries in Call of Cthulhu, or battling in Warhammer 40k, let my music set the perfect tone for your games. As a fellow tabletop enthusiast, I create tracks that resonate with your game's diverse realms, available on all major streaming services. Plus, I also offer custom commissions to tailor the perfect soundtrack for your unique campaigns. Ready for immersive gaming sessions across all genres? Visit Culture and Compositions on Patreon for access to over 150 songs, including looped versions, that will make your game unforgettable. That's COLTRIN Compositions.
Do you like nerdy stuff? Of course you do. Want to see someone make that stuff, but smaller? Sculpting Minis, tabletop terrain, props, puppets, and tutorials, a crafting channel for all things nerdy. Join me over on YouTube at Niche Crafts, where I make stuff about stuff.
Welcome back to Movie versus Movie. We're talking about hometown heroes, blue collar classics. We just talked about Joe Dirt. And is there anything else like final you want to say about Joe Dirt to really just like put that one to bed?
There's a sequel called Joe Dirt 2 American
I saw that and it was
Loser.
2015. Have you seen it?
No.
Should we watch it?
No. I don't think so.
You're like,
it
nah.
looks like everyone came back. I don't know if Christopher Walken did, but most of the main characters came back.
They really did. David Spade's there.
I don't see where there'd be any value in that,
Yeah.
but happy that David Spade got to do that.
Happy that he's finding work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree. I think that this movie is like, don't watch it. It's fine. It's like if you're really nostalgic for a very specific time, I feel like you can watch it, but like this movie we're about to do, oh man, this is the one you should go back to if you're looking for a fix.
I think so.
Patrick, I think this is one of your favorite movies.
Yeah.
Hot Rod.
And it's weird because I've never had to like talk about it intellectually in any way.
Is that what we're doing?
I think so, to some extent, more than I've ever talked about it before.
Yeah.
But I talked about this, I think, on a previous episode, the idea of the DVD shelf canon from like when you're growing up, and this was definitely a staple of it. Joe Dirt, funnily, was a iPod video selection.
This is so funny. This is such a funny thing about you. You have certain movies, like Ratatouille was one, where you saw specific scenes via iPod video.
Ratatouille, I had just that one scene. Joe Dirt, I had the whole movie, but I didn't pay for it. I think I downloaded it off of someone else's computer, but I don't remember if I had, you only have a couple full movies. So like I did watch, just random scenes from Joe Dirt a lot.
It kind of is perfect for that because of the weird nature of like the scenes that are just sketches essentially.
Right. And you can just kind of go to the ones that
that you want to see. Yeah, be like, oh, let me show you this scene where this guy eats fast food off of a poop meteorite.
Space Peanut.
Yeah, Space Peanut.
No, Hot Rod, it came out in 2007, so I was like 13.
I was about to go into high school.
Yeah, which is honestly, I guess that makes sense. My oldest brother would have been a senior in high school, and he, if I remember correctly, went to see it in theaters with his friends, and I don't think anyone else saw it in theaters. I don't know. I don't think it did well at the box
office. It did
office.
not, which is such a shame.
Yeah.
Because I love the Lonely Island guys as movie makers. They've done Superstar. Popstar.
Yeah.
Never Stopping.
Yeah.
And they've done one other one.
Am I blanking? What else have they done?
Fuck. They did another one. But I just love these guys in everything that they do. It's silly, it's goofy, and also it's very nostalgic for me because this was also the time where Lonely Island was like blowing up. This is like I'm on a boat era.
Right. And it's funny that this movie didn't land bigger because they were so big in pop culture. But I think SNL, there'd been a number of SNL movie flops that maybe people just wrote it off.
But this cast too, holy shit, what a great cast.
I know.
It's like Andy Samberg, Danny McBride, Bill Hader.
Early Danny McBride, Bill Hader.
Jeez, it's so good.
And then also like legitimate like Ian McShane and Sissy Spacek, right? As the parents, which is an incredible get. But that so I think my brother saw it. Maybe I think they saw it in theaters. I could be wrong. They maybe rented it and were like, this is the funniest movie we've ever seen. And my brother, I feel like my brother and his friends I very much looked up to for like comedic taste.
Yeah.
Because at the time too, they were making their own like little comedy home videos.
Yeah.
Which I think we still have.
Holy
some of them
shit.
Hold up. Some of them do not hold up.
Oh no.
Should not be seen by anyone. Like one was just like a gorilla keeps attacking people, which that one was pretty funny.
Yeah.
It was very simple.
Yeah.
They like tackled
physical comedy, baby.
Yeah, they like tackled my brother's friend's brother like as he got off the bus.
Yeah.
And then there's one called Hitler Music Video, which actually is kind of funny. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's basically just a you gotta see it.
Yeah.
And then I won't talk about the other ones. Oh,
Yes.
no, actually, there was another funny one. They did a Pimp My Ride parody, which was pretty funny.
Love it. Were they fans of Whitest Kids You Know?
I don't know if they were.
Because like
I remember,
the Hitler music video as a concept just feels very Whitest Kids You Know. You know.
I remember watching that in like middle school and high school, but I don't know if my brother. Anyways, I remember them being like, "This is the funniest movie ever," and then I think we rented it at some point, and then just absolutely loved it.
You just latched on to it.
Yeah, and then had it on DVD, and it just like became a staple in our house. But it felt like this like having a secret because no one else had like. It just like didn't register at the time.
You know what the difference between these two movies are? It's the difference between The Office and Parks and Rec.
Ooh, I'm curious your take.
Because Joe Dirt has a mean edge, like you said. Like, are they making fun?
It's
is this
fair.
like stereotyping? Whatever. It has sort of that meanness.
Yeah.
And the comedy can be mean. Like the shock jock is just like a total dick.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. And I think that The Office is kind of like that, where it's like it's Schadenfreude.
That's fair.
Where Hot Rod is, I think, much more like Heart of Gold. Like these guys all love each other and support each other, and they're trying to do this thing. They're just idiots.
Yeah.
And it's great.
Yeah.
You're always on their side. They never do anything super bad except for when Danny McBride assaults that man, which is very funny. But why don't we start from the beginning? And you know this movie backwards and forwards, so you should lead us through. Probably.
I do, but it's the same thing where it's such a collection of sketches. I would have a hard time telling it in order. But
apparently, just for some background, there was like the screenwriter wrote it, and then the Lonely Island guys like kind of grabbed it and were like, "This is fun, except we're going to rewrite it so that it's Lonely Island."
Oh, really?
So that's
really
why
funny.
it feels very them.
Okay, so it had the like outline of a film.
Right, which is why I think it still is somewhat cohesive, but it is definitely a lot of sketches put into it.
Right. So you get the opening scene, which one like this movie, it's really funny. Like the thing, so with like Joe Dirt, there's funny stuff, but it doesn't feel Like nothing about the movie visually or like how it's made feels in any way remarkable. Whereas like this movie, they actually have some like genuinely incredible stunts and physical comedy.
Yeah.
So you
could tell that they were like, when is the next time I'm going to be able to set myself on fire?
Yeah.
Or like get hit by a car.
Right. Or just like set up these like kind of really dangerous looking like pratfalls that you're like, because the first scene is him trying to jump over the RV on this ramp, and he's like, did you reinforce the ramp? And they're like, no, we didn't have time. Basically you get incredible soundtrack right away. He goes for the jump on his little pedal bike, and just
it's like a motorized pedal bike, which is great.
And just absolutely biffs it.
Yeah, he totally eats it right into the RV. This is one of my favorite things about this movie, is that its main joke is he gonna make the stunt? And the answer is always no.
Yeah.
And it's it's gonna happen this time. It's Lucy in the Football, where they just keep pulling it away, but in increasingly more dangerous situations. And you just get to see the fallout every time, and it never isn't funny.
No.
It's so good.
It's incredible. So yeah, then I think I basically go from that cutting into a montage of just like him, I think, riding his little scooter around.
Yeah,
right?
he's like,
And then-
and like all the kids in town are like following him.
Yeah,
and he's
yeah.
doing tricks on his bike. And he's like, hey, you guys might want to come jump in the pool soon.
Right. So we get jump in the pool, and then
And his neighbor comes home and like and this is again a kind of similarity, right?
yeah.
But she's at the pool, right? Or is she not?
Yeah, she comes to watch him jump the pool. But I think you get the first scene is them at the little snack bar, because that's also important, because you have...
Yes.
That was the other thing, watching it. I hadn't watched it in years at this point. Maybe, probably before the pandemic was the last time I watched it. And it's one of those things where you're like, am I going to like remember this stuff? And you get the scene of him guessing jelly bean flavors.
Yeah.
And it was just like immediately like all the lines come back and you're like, psych, very cherry.
Well, this is the other thing about this movie, going back to my point about like Office versus Parks and Rec. When you see Joe Dirt like hanging out, it's always him being mistreated by people. But I feel like this movie actually does a pretty good job. I don't know about your experience, but like of living in a small town.
I think so. There's just these guys. Yeah, they feel, I mean, as much as they're insane characters, they kind of feel like real people.
Yeah. They're just like friends who have kind of made their own sort of dialect and like internal sort of way they talk to each other.
And it's like it's a small town. They're kind of the only people they have.
Yeah.
And
they've kind of latched onto this thing, which is like he wants to be a stuntman. And so all of his friends are like kind of put part of their identity into it. And they're like, no, I'm the guy who builds the ramps. And like, I'm the guy who like promotes it or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just fun. It's like very good natured.
Yeah. He's hanging out.
But yeah, so they're at the snack shack, and he's like trying random jelly beans with his eyes closed and guessing the flavors. Very great. And then
Rico comes out. Hey,
Yeah.
you shitheads, I just found a bag of fireworks in the men's restroom. Would you care to light them off with me?
Danny McBride is like, this is pure Danny McBride.
Yeah.
This is like pure uncut Bride.
Yeah. Just such a like singular performer of like, he's been doing the same thing since his career started, and it still works.
Yeah.
Like I haven't watched The Righteous Gemstones. I started to watch it and it just like fell off, but like he was great in that, and he's basically just been doing the same thing.
Yeah, this sort
this
of
whole
like
time.
the kind of like mullety sort of like, I don't even know how to describe it.
It's kind of like the evolution, or like it's also kind of the man-child character where he's always super arrogant.
Yeah.
But also
It's
kind of
like
lovable.
he's like all machismo, but he's not like violent or well. There is a scene we'll talk about.
But okay, we can keep moving with the plot though. I think I'm trying to remember, you get introduced to the idea, I don't remember the exact order, but you get basically introduced to the idea that Rod and his mom remarried Frank.
Yeah, and
his
he has a step brother who's like also
Kevin.
one of his best friends.
Right. And his dad, and they all live together. And then at some point it's revealed, maybe later on, that his dad was a stuntman who died.
His dad who's dead. Yes.
Yeah. His super dead dad was a stuntman.
And also, like, one of the great things about this film is the very weird relationship between him and his stepfather.
Oh yeah, that's the whole emotional core of the movie is that Rod needs to kick his stepfather's ass to prove that he's a man.
Yeah, and they literally fight. Like,
Yeah,
one of the scenes, like, very early on is him and Kevin, and Kevin's like, do you really have to fight him? And he's like, I do.
Yes. He puts the fake mustache on, and yeah, he physically fights Frank, and Frank
Beats
kicks
the
his ass.
shit out of
Yeah.
him, which is like, again, this is the thing about this movie that's funny, is like, it's very visceral.
Yeah, and that's again the physical comedy of their fight is like really funny because he's just getting thrown around.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the when I was in like middle school, everyone loved the Peter Griffin and the chicken fights.
Yeah.
And how like those are actually pretty gory and like pretty physically like, wow, like this is some of that. Like he gets
Yeah.
punched in the nose and like he gets his legs taken out from under him. There's throwing stars at one point. It's like fucking insane. Very good though.
But yeah, so then he's gonna jump the pool. He's giving out flyers that he's gonna jump the pool so the whole town can come watch. And then yeah, he's out putting the trash out, which he does stuntman.
He does like a backflip, right?
Yeah, he just like runs up and throws it, and then he runs into his old neighbor from growing up, Denise,
Yes.
who's back in town. It's clear that he has a crush on her, and I think
And she like went to Harvard or something, or NYU or some crazy thing.
And like probably the biggest criticism I'd have of this movie is that it does like have the trope of the like beautiful successful woman for some reason falling for this loser.
Yeah.
I think it gives you some reason for her to like him, at least in contrast to like Will Arnett.
Who's her current boyfriend, you
Right.
find out, who is a total dirtbag.
Yeah.
He's, again, I don't know where in his career, this was after
Arrested Development. Yeah.
but he is like Will Arnett being a dick times 1,000.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit.
very funny.
What a character.
So basically it's clear that he has a crush on her. You get the great line to end the scene where he's like, "You look pretty, Denise." And she's like, "What?" I said, "You look shitty. Good night." And then then he invites her to the pool, and so you get the scene of him jumping the pool.
And again, does not make it.
Does not make it, hilariously so. It's like I
makes,
wonder
like, halfway.
I wonder how much
first.
setup it took because he lands like directly in the middle of the pool,
Yeah.
face like head
Face
down.
down.
Like I
It's-
wonder how that's a stunt that takes planning.
You don't do that by accident.
No,
you can't
don't-
fail that
right.
perfectly.
And you're
yeah.
like, how many times do they run this to get it? You also get introduced to the character of Richardson at that time,
Richardson,
who's great.
who is such an enigma to me.
Yeah.
Like why they decided it was worth it to put that character in.
And I could look up, I don't want to, I could just be not aware of this actor's career, but most of the people in the movie are like, you recognize, you're like, oh my God, it's that guy.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I don't know if
Never.
I've seen that guy in anything else.
right.
But I
And-
wonder if he's just like worked, he was just a guy that was, I don't know.
This
Yeah.
movie is interesting because definitely in the DNA is the kind of short form internet video. Like Richardson just like kind of hip thrusts and dances throughout
Yes.
most of this movie. Every time
Yeah.
we see him, he basically finds an excuse to throw things into the air and then start like hip thrusting dancing, which is very weird and funny.
It is that like 2007 internet humor
Yeah.
of like, kind of like it's funny because it's random.
Yep. I'm so
But-
random.
I think, no
No one's ever done that before, Patrick.
No one will ever do it again. It still works for me. I still think it's hilarious, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I saw it fresh, I'd be like, all right, but I still love it. Also something we need to address when we watch this movie with, our partners, or your fiance, Aaron and Alice, and our friend Jamie, there were multiple comments about how hot Andy Samberg was and how everyone was like,
I didn't
thought he was
expect
such
it.
a heartthrob.
Yeah.
And that surprised me.
Because
And-
he's such a goofball.
yeah. And I like,
Maybe it's their taste though, because all three of those people ended up with people like us.
it's true. Maybe. Cause I'm like, I think, yeah, like it just surprised me. I never thought of him as like being,
I can see him more so like now in Palm Springs. He's
Yeah.
sort of like a romantic lead and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he carries it. But he is so goofy
Yeah.
in Hot Rod that
Yeah.
it did not even cross my mind that he would be like the sex symbol of the movie, I guess.
Yeah.
But they were all like, oh, fucking Andy Samberg. Oh my God.
But okay, anyway, plot wise, so he fails the jump. He comes home angry, and the rest of his family's very somber.
Yeah, because Kevin didn't come to the jump.
Kevin didn't come to the jump, and Frank is on the couch, and it's revealed that Frank is gravely ill
Yeah.
and needs a new heart.
Yes, because his like heart is failing. Kevin is on his chest and he's like petting Kevin's hair.
Yeah, that's fair. It's like funny, but also kind of endearing.
Yeah.
And then so Rod is angered by this because he needs Frank well enough so he can finally kick his ass
And be
prove to
loved
him-
by him, essentially.
Yeah, essentially earn his love by proving that he's a man.
One of my favorite dialogue quotes in this was like Kevin being like, I think he already respects you. And he's like, no, I have to kick his ass. You're not like you. You're his actual son. I'm just his stepson.
So he vows that he's going to raise the money to get him the new heart and
Yep.
kick his ass, and he breaks the lamp and he storms out in a huff.
It's like $60,000. It's like not small money. It's big, big money.
And so then he storms out. He goes into the woods to punch dance his
So
rage out.
funny. The best scene in the entire movie for
It
me.
is the best scene. It's
It's Footloose. It's so
Footloose,
good.
because it's like the only scene that's I think is like a direct parody too.
Yeah.
Where like you could put it like side by side with that scene in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's the best. It's just so good because there's like a joke to it. It's obviously parodying that scene, how ridiculous he is, and then it like it heightens into him just doing full on gymnastics. And there's a pommel horse in the woods.
Yeah.
And that's funny. That's funny in and of itself.
Yeah, here's the thing that I really like about it is because it could have just stopped with being a parody.
Right.
But then it has the other joke right after it, which I'm going to let you talk about, which is the best joke, I think, in the movie. So keep going.
Right. So he's doing increasingly more difficult gymnastics. And then at one point he just lands and falls.
He's like,
falls
"Oop."
off.
Yeah, he just oops.
Just very abruptly falls down the hill and then just continues to fall down the hill
For like
4
5 minutes. It's
Yeah.
so good. It's one of those things. It's the same thing as the main joke of the movie being that he always fails a stunt.
Yeah.
The joke in this is like, no, we're just gonna have you watch him fall down more like increasingly
You
dangerous.
keep thinking it's
things.
going to stop. And it's like it's like technically very competent, like the shot construction to keep having different angles and different ways for him to fall.
It's
And-
visually interesting.
Yeah, and pinball off the trees. And then you get like a wide shot where you don't like, because he's screaming the whole time.
Yeah.
You get a wide shot where it's silence, and then you gradually hear his screaming coming in as he comes into frame. It's just so good.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's like the hardest I think I've like ever laughed.
I
as when
laughed so hard that the first time I had to pause the movie. I was like, this came out of nowhere and it's so good. It's very funny. I think it is, in a nutshell, what this movie is all about. It's just like silly fun, you know? But yeah, so he falls down this mountain. He gets to the bottom, and
he lands, looks up. There's a billboard of, not sure what it's advertising. It's just a picture of people skydiving that says one big jump.
Yep.
So that clicks in his head. He gets the idea. I'm going to do a big jump, use it as a fundraiser.
raise all the money for Frank. Get his heart fixed.
Operation Fiscal Jackhammer. And they decide he's going to start. Right. So then you get, again, just every scene in this is a bit or a sketch.
And also the dialogue, like you just saying fiscal jackhammer, that hit my ear and just sort of like went through when I was watching it.
Yeah.
But that's legitimately like it's just like stupid and funny. Like there's so many things in, like you said, like cherry or psych cherry or whatever. It's like these things are so funny, but there's so many of them packed in. Sometimes you miss it. So like even on the second watch, I was laughing at new stuff.
Right. And it's like specific too. Like it's stuff that you remember.
Yeah.
Because then the next bit is like, well, we haven't talked about yet. Dave, Super Dave, who's Bill Hader's character.
Fucking love
Just so
Dave.
good.
Bill Hader is my favorite, maybe my favorite actor.
He's amazing. Just anything he does makes me laugh.
Yeah.
And I thought, did you watch all of Barry?
We are in the final season.
Oh, nice. Barry just like proved his chops, as a dramatic actor
And a director.
Like, yeah, love Bill Hader. His character in this is the best because he's like, I got to go to work at the skating rink. So you get the montage of him laying out their plan, like while he's doing all his tasks, and then it cuts to them like everyone but Rod, and it's just like a man, like a homeless man outside the back talking about how his like can collecting regimen.
Then we get all the cans and bring it here, and then we get a big pile of cans, and then Rod like comes out and it's like, what are you guys doing? We have work to do.
And they're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Just funny. Anyways, okay, so then I feel like then it just kind of opens the door for just a series of sketches and pratfalls, because the idea is he's going to do a bunch of small stunts to raise money and also
to afford the big stunt.
Right. And also start training so he can do the big stunt. I also think he reveals that he's going to jump over one more bus than Evel Knievel did.
Yeah.
Because he looked
That's
it
the
up
big thing.
on the internet.
And one of my favorite parts about this like next session is like, or this next section, I guess I meant to say, is that like you just see fucking hilarious visual gags that wouldn't really make sense anywhere else. Like you see basically him at a children's party because they've rented a stuntman for the children's party, and he's on fire like running after the kids and like tripping into the cake and everything. It's really good.
I think you also just get a lot throughout the movie where it's clear that it's a movie where they improvise a good bit.
Yeah.
A lot of the interstitial stuff and starting scenes, you can tell feels like they were just messing around and riffing, like when Danny McBride's doing the high fives with the two of them. And it's just little stuff like that that's really memorable, but you don't get as much of the sense, I think, as you do in your like Anchorman type movies or like even recent movies like Bottoms, where you're like, this movie was largely improvised. You can tell that they were just like riffing.
The difference between them for me is that for like an Anchorman or whatever, it doesn't feel very specific. It's like just sort of like, oh, this is funny, I'm going to keep expanding upon it. In Hot Rod, everything, like you said before, is very specific down to the dialogue where it's quotable, which most improv is not really quotable.
Right.
And it works. I don't know. But going back to the improvisation, there's a scene in this like montage of him training where he gets on a bobsled sort of thing, and he's going down this really steep hill, and he slams into like a truck, and they're all like, oh no, and they run down to help him. And then this guy comes out of his house whose truck it is, and then Danny McBride just beats the shit out of him and starts hitting him with like an empty garbage can. That was all improvised. I looked it up afterwards. It is out of nowhere. Like they're like, Rod, are you okay? And you just see Danny McBride like dumping trash on this guy and like hitting him with the traffic cone.
He takes his hat.
Yeah.
This is my hat now.
This is my hat now.
This is my hat. It's just so good. Yeah, you get the sled, you get the water scene where he's trying to hold his breath underwater.
Yes.
And even that
And
one
he
opens,
like passes out.
Yeah, but there's so many fun. You get like Dave's sister coming out with the Kool-Aid, and then
Anyone allergic to cherry? Why don't you go get the punch?
and then the whole thing feels improvised too beforehand, where they ring the bell and they all try to sing the note.
Yeah,
it's just so good. And then he just immediately can't hold his breath, passes out.
Yeah, and the bell thing breaks, so they're basically just waterboarding him.
Okay, and then you get, I'm trying to think of everything else in here. You get the scene where they blow him up. It's at like a corporate retreat.
Yes.
And they're singing for He's a Jolly Good Fellow, and then Rico's like, you want me to blow him up now? Kevin's like, no.
And click.
Yeah.
That's him jumping out of it. And then everyone runs away. And then the guy goes, you are a terrible stuntman. He's like, what? He's like, you are a terrible stuntman. He's like, no. Yeah, no, I could hear you. It was just really mean.
You get, the mom after the birthday party telling him to get the fuck off her porch.
Yeah.
And so I think you kind of
also there's weird, like there's ones with like a bunch of kids from like a school trip or whatever, and he gets hit with a washing machine or something.
Yeah. They just like invite the kids down to the like dump to watch that. So basically this leads up to, it's revealed at some point Kevin shows Rod that he's been editing this video together with a lot of the footage they've been shooting. And this is where Rod tells Kevin that he's the next Douglas Bubble Trousers. It's also very important to my personal lore.
Yeah, which is like your username for everything. I won't say the exact version of it, but man.
But anyway, so then you get basically
Douglas Bubble Trousers.
Rod's thrilled by this. They decide Rod wants to show the movie as a fundraiser for them.
Yep.
So they put together a showing of the movie,
And everyone laughs
and
at
everyone laughs. It's revealed that Rod's actually the butt of the joke. That's the thing. He doesn't realize the whole time. He thinks he's a cool stuntman, and he's not.
He's the butt of the joke.
They're laughing at him. So he gets upset, throws the projector out the window.
Which lands on a police car.
Yeah.
And he has to use all the money that they had raised to replace it, essentially. Right. Which, man, the heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And we also find out that
second act turn, or whatever you call it.
Yeah, the second act turn. The girl that he has a crush on, the woman, it's kind of revealed Will Arnett is her boyfriend.
Right.
And that is kind of crushing to Rod. He's been taking a lot of L's. And we also get introduced to this character who's like a lawyer, gonna be partner, but he is the most despicable person in the entire world.
Yeah, Jonathan is his name.
He's like, literally one of his lines later in the movie is that he runs over a raccoon. He's like, oh man, Williams is gonna love this when I tell him.
Well, he gets flaming Dr. Peppers at the Applebee's, and then he sees his buddy Sullivan.
Yeah, he's like,
Sullivan, you chode! I owe you a shot to the nuts. It's just so good. There's so many specific lines.
Yeah,
but yeah, and that too, Rod reveals in great detail how his dad died.
Yeah,
his face exploded through the back of his skull when he wrecked trying to do a stunt, and then he died immediately the next day. But after or what were you gonna say?
I was just also gonna say that it's also kind of an L because they're back at the stand and he asks out the cashier
Kathy,
because he's trying to get her to be jealous, the original woman, and she says yes, but then never comes, and so it's just him on a double date with the two of them.
By Kathy.
Oh, it's so sad.
But yeah, and so I think after the movie, his mom delivers him the news that his dad was not, in fact, a stuntman.
Mm-hmm.
He was a mechanic or something in the picture. He worked at a tire center, and the picture of Evel Knievel was just Evel Knievel came to town.
Had stopped by, yeah.
His dad actually died because he choked in a pie eating contest.
Yeah.
And so Rod is devastated. He gives up the stuntman life, which is
and then he's just at a supermarket in a button-down shirt.
But it's like a button-down polo, like quarter button polo with Argyle with a tie on, and he's just filling up his cart with bottles of liquor.
Yeah, and it's like a full shopping cart full of liquor. And then they have to convince him, no.
Right.
They
gotta convince him to get back in the game.
Yeah.
As a stuntman. And
is it Dave who does it with his accident?
Oh, that might be what does it. Also, there's just so many good. This is a short movie too, and I'm like, we got to get through this. But also, there's
so much we want to stop for.
Because then you get could be the best scene in the movie where
I love it.
Dave calls him in the middle of the night, asks him to come pick him up and take him to the hospital.
He's like, yeah, if you don't mind, if you can come by, and I just need to go to the hospital. And he's like, yeah, it's 2 a.m. He's like, yeah, no, I understand. If you can't, then someone else can. No worries. And he's like, okay, I'll be right by. And then he picks him up and he's just drumming on a box outside, and he gets into the car, and then it is revealed that Dave got super high on PCP or acid or something like that.
Yeah,
on acid at his job, and he was grinding skates and a piece of metal.
I don't even think he was grinding skates. I think it's just he goes home and starts grinding random shit on his bench grinder. Yeah. And gets a piece of metal in his eye.
It's stuck in his forehead. And then they have this deep talk about what it means to want to do something.
Yeah. And then he drops him off at the hospital. He immediately tries to fight this guy.
My favorite line in the whole movie is he's like, you know what? Thanks again, Rod. This meant a lot. You were there for me. And he's like, yeah, no problem, Dave. And he starts walking, and then he slowly he's pointing at the door, and then he points at trash can. And he goes, hospital? And he goes, trash can. And then he goes, hospital. And goes towards the door.
And then starts to try to
yeah, he's judoing with the staff. Very funny. They wrestle him to the floor. That's the last time we see him for a little while.
Right. Okay. So then, what do we get to? And then. Yeah, so he's convinced to get back into it.
Yeah,
basically,
it's time for the jump.
They they get sponsored, they get exclusive.
Well, he goes back to Kevin because he's like, I'm sorry I was such a dickhead. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry we can't do this. And he reveals that he had uploaded some of these videos online
Right.
and they became super popular,
Right.
like 200,000 views or whatever. And the local radio station was like, I want to sponsor you, which you'll have to tell that scene because he's in this, the Leo Spaceman, what's his
Chris Parnell.
Chris Parnell,
Yeah.
who I am always thrilled to see in
Yeah.
anything, and
Yeah.
he's a fantastic
Just
character.
consistently great.
Yeah.
So you get one. I think somewhere in there you get the Cool Beans scene,
Mm-hmm.
which is also that feels like almost the most just like Lonely Island sketch,
Yeah,
digital
again.
short.
There's a part
And-
where they start doing like editing tricks where it's like
Yeah.
kind of like remixing the scene.
Yeah.
I can't really describe it better than that. You have to watch it. It's very funny. It's very weird.
And they did. I think I saw a thing where they're like, we just threw that in the movie. We weren't gonna have it in there, and then I think they're like, we put it in a test screening, and people loved it. So we're like, I guess we'll keep it in there. But anyways, so yeah, the local AM radio station gets exclusive sponsored broadcasting rights for the jump.
Busy's like, this is gonna bring back AM radio.
And it's Chris Parnell, and he is like the world's greatest AM radio enthusiast to the point where he has a bootleg Calvin and Hobbes tattoo where he's pissing on both television and FM radio, and he explains in detail how his pee is able to split streams.
Yeah.
So anyways, so then they're set up for the jump. He kind of has the great reunion. It's revealed that each of his crew has in some way upgraded his setup. He gets a
yeah.
new uniform.
He's got
gets
pyrotechnics.
He's got pyrotechnics. He's got a faster bike.
He has a real motorcycle.
He has a real motorcycle, and then Rico gives him a rock to demonstrate his dedication. And so then you get it's kind of it's like a telethon style.
Mm-hmm.
They're raising the money. You get the good. Or no, is it before or after they kisses Denise? It's after they.
It's
kisses.
after,
Okay.
yeah.
So he
But
gets.
Denise, he's like calls Denise to be like, can you come? Like we're actually doing the jump,
Right.
and the boyfriend doesn't tell her.
Right.
Yeah.
And so she finds out late, gets there late, similar to Joe Dirt with Brandy and Kid Rock.
Yeah.
You're right, because then she leaves him. You get the whole babe wait scene. There's just
Wait! It's like him calling after someone who is long gone.
Right.
Very
Again,
funny.
That feels like that like improv to the extent that they're like, we're just gonna roll the cameras and
see what this actor does.
Keep heightening it, but also as like a specific thing. You know, he wasn't just like riffing.
Yeah.
Right. So he gets to the top. He raises enough money for Frank, and then goes and does the jump. And again, it's like the ultimate payoff of the whole bit you're talking about, where every jump goes wrong.
Yeah.
And he's in the air, and you're like convinced that he's doing it.
And he's like saluting the audience.
Yeah.
He's in control.
Right.
And then the camera like backs up a little bit, and the motorcycle is like not attached to him anymore.
And this one's like a violent.
This
like,
one's a bad
This one's
fall,
like
yeah.
not funny in the way the other ones are.
Yeah, the other ones are silly, like, oh, he
Right.
got hit with something. This one's like, he should have died.
Right. But then obviously he falls. It's like terrible. He has a vision of the grilled cheese and a taco fighting, which is a callback to an earlier bit that we didn't
thing.
even talk about.
Yeah.
And then he comes to, and you know, the triumph is his body's broken, but he stands up to the cheering crowd.
Yeah. And they get the enough money.
Yeah, that's why they get enough money.
Because like,
at the
it was
end.
funny, the money is going up, and then when he's about to do the jump, it just like stops before.
Right.
Because everyone's waiting to see what happens.
But then he kisses Denise. No, I think he kisses her before, because it cuts to Dave going, whoa, why is Rod kissing his sister?
And then they're like, he's not his sister. And they're like, that's not his sister.
And you get Ebenezer Scrooge too.
Yeah.
With the Christmas goose hanging out of the bus. So I mean, okay, so then
And that might sound like a euphemism or whatever. Literally,
Yeah, it's
Ebenezer
Ebenezer
Scrooge,
Scrooge.
with a Christmas goose comes out of one of the buses and is like, "What day is it today?" Or whatever.
and so then you get the epilogue or the coda to the story is they're like having this cookout, but it's revealed they've gotten Frank the heart transplant, so he can finally fight him.
And he's growing his own mustache instead of taping one on.
because he has a hormone. It's revealed that he has a hormone disorder, and so you get that he is he can finally fight Frank, and it's a
funny
heightened fight.
Yeah.
They're busting through walls.
They're throwing shuriken.
They're throwing the stars.
Someone gets his face pushed onto a grill.
Yeah. He does the ultimate punch that he tries earlier where he punches with both hands and kicks at the same time, but it
Makes
actually
him poop
lands.
himself. Yeah.
And then, he hits him at the very end. Literally, the last thing is, again, introduced earlier, a Tai Chi move, which Tai Chi is not a combat practice that can make a grown man crap his pants and not know why. And he performs that on Frank.
And then it's just him like breakfast clubbing, and that's the end of the movie. This movie fucking rocks. I love this movie.
It's a great movie.
It's also it's probably the perfect movie to have on in the background somewhere. Like if you're at a party and it's just like on, it's kind of the perfect thing. Everyone's gonna kind of like slowly start to watch it, kind of thing.
Right. You can kind of catch people's eye, but you can check in and out.
Yeah.
It's visually very fun to watch and funny. You don't have to like hear what's going on.
Yep.
Yeah. It's just like I think it really like distills like sense of humor that I just loved at that time.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a movie that for the most part holds up. There's very little jokes that date it to 2007 in a negative way.
Yeah, I would say if there are, I don't remember if there are any ones that are like really blatant, but if there are, they didn't bother me.
Right. It's funny. There's one part where Frank does call him a homo.
Yeah.
He says it kind of under his breath. And I didn't realize that that's what he said until this time watching it because we had subtitles on. I always thought he said, "Oh, no." And I was like, okay, well. But that's also kind of like Frank's, I guess, the whole character and the idea is that he's trying to like prove his masculinity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just like hard to like break down into words like what other than just like this is a movie that just brings me joy.
Yeah, it is just a joyful experience watching it. I get very anxious during movies, as you know, and as the audience, if they have been with us for a while, they will also know that I freak out. However, this movie, like, very easy to watch. It goes down smooth.
It does.
Yeah, I would, and also it gets out of the problem I have with the genre of the sort of like man-child thing, where the movie is definitely like an adolescent fantasy, but it doesn't try to be like, but this is like we're men or whatever. It's like it's not like a masculinity thing. It's just sort of like this is kids being kids kind of thing.
In the end result, the goal, like his goal isn't, you think of like your Billy Madison's, your like in those, they have a very like adult goal they're trying to achieve that in the end, it's kind of like, despite their manliness or not manliness, despite their childhood nature, childish nature and stuff, they're like still able to accomplish these goals where this, like his goal is so absurd that it's like, you don't have that issue where like the movie's not trying to convince you that like Rod is like a functional person.
Yeah, he lives at home.
Yeah,
like this.
Not that he's not functional, but he can, like they're not trying to convince you that like this is someone who could like run a business or be like a professional.
This isn't someone that you can like self-insert or whatever.
Right.
Like this isn't like someone to aspire to be.
Right.
But at the same time, it's sort of like, but we all either have been that person when we were teenagers, or like could recognize that person in life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you get, I think like kind of through the Denise character of the like appreciation for like, in contrast to Jonathan, you get the appreciation for like the genuine, like good nature and like love that they have for each other and their little crew. But it doesn't really like, it doesn't lean into that too heavy with it.
It does kind of feel like the romance element was kind of tacked on. Like it doesn't need it. I like her as a character. She's funny. She's a great actress, and there are some good moments. Like she's the one who teaches Rod the Tai Chi move where he makes people shit himself or whatever. She's very funny. I like the addition of her. But like, it doesn't really make sense them like falling in love or whatever.
She's not given a ton to do, and it doesn't really justify that like Rod would be someone who could like have a relationship with like a functioning adult like that.
Yeah.
But
Also,
you're like, wow.
Yeah, I think that there's it definitely leans on the sort of innocence and naivete of Rod to carry some of the kind of like, does this make sense through? But it is definitely like something, I feel like it's kind of like a true SNL movie in that you just go and you know it's gonna be funny and you can kind of like sit down and just have it be funny, and you don't need anything else out of it, kind of thing.
You don't have to think too hard about it, and like
Also, Ian McShane is very good.
Yeah.
He's so mean, but in like, you can tell that he loves Rod.
Right.
He's a very good actor. I don't know. He contains multitudes.
He's incredible.
It's like going from this movie to like the elegant, like John Wick, like hotelier guy. It's very funny. So out of these two, here's what I think.
Okay.
I think that Joe Dirt encapsulates the idea of, or like the American stereotype of what like the blue collar life is. It is all of the different stereotypes, like of small, like Midwestern and Southern towns of like being kind of a hick and hillbilly or whatever. It has its moments. It's really dated. It genuinely did make me laugh at some points.
Yeah.
So it has some stuff going in its favor. Hot Rod feels like something that you like. It feels like my small town when I was a kid, like me and my friends running around and doing dumb bullshit. Like it felt very nostalgic to me. I really liked it. It does feel like it feels like it cares more about the characters too. It's like not talking down to them. Like they are heroes, you know? And so I feel like in this matchup of like blue collar hero, you know, hometown hero kind of thing, I think that I like Hot Rod better in that it feels as though these characters are heroes, whereas in the other one it just feels sort of like stereotypical and sort of like
yeah that aspect of them is less of the punchline than in Joe Dirt, because Hot Rod doesn't really, like, the stuntman is an American trope and ideal, but it doesn't Hot Rod doesn't really,
it feels
traffic.
Americana.
But there's not like a ton of like, there's not obvious stereotypes like in Joe Dirt. Joe Dirt's clearly like, oh, he's a hick, so he's likes having sex with his sister. It doesn't really like, Hot Rod doesn't really like look down on its characters in that way.
And I just think that the movie is better made. Hot Rod is just better made. Like when you think of like the comedy that you have in Joe Dirt, the parts that made me laugh are like the really surreal, weird shit. Because the rest of it is just like standing and talking. There's not a whole lot of like really deep visual gags. There's a few, but the visual storytelling in Hot Rod is very well done. There's a lot of really cool cuts, like the scene where he's explaining the plan, and they're they're like on a Zamboni, then they're like in the skate shot, and then they're back outside where that homeless guy is talking about the cans or whatever. Like all of that is done in a very visually interesting way that I feel like it's kind of crazy to me that Hot Rod wasn't recognized a little bit more during its time, because it was just a flop. Like it like stalled out those careers for a long time.
Box office didn't do well critically. It is kind of crazy, but I think it just feels like it has more craft to it, and like more just more attention to detail was put into it. But it's unfortunate that I think it's now that and Popstar are like much more appreciated now than they were at the time. But
and it also kind of feels like I'm not sure I would call Andy Samberg like an auteur.
Right.
But that group has a style. And it felt like this was them trying to use that style and apply it to a medium that they hadn't before. And I think that, of course, the first time you do anything, you're going to make some mistakes. There's some missteps. But like largely it works. For it being their first feature length too, of like moving from their like very established realm of like web videos, which they basically continued on to SNL, and then into like feature length and kind of getting the like upgrade. Like imagine going from your whole life is writing for 5-minute blocks, like you're trying to fill 5 minutes, and then you're filling 90. That's crazy that they were able to do that so well. Yeah, I feel like the acting in this movie is super solid. Nobody really steals the show, which I think is great. Like everyone, we could talk about each and every character and be like, this one scene, they were fucking just on it. Like what a great scene and what great acting from them. It kind of feels like a true ensemble piece, which I really like.
Yeah.
Joe Dirt feels very much like it's David Spade moving his career forward in some way. Yeah, you know what I mean? All right. Well, anything else you want to talk about? Do you agree with what's your take?
Yeah, I think I agree with what you said. I don't know. I didn't think too hard about like the artistic merit or, the statements of the movie other than like, Hot Rod's a better movie. Yeah. I like it more.
Yeah, exactly.
So Hot Rod definitely
sort of
wins
gut
in my
check
book.
of just, I like this one more.
But no, I'm glad. It's fun to do. It's like a different type of movie than we've done before.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to talk about comedies in the same way that we talked about other movies.
Yeah.
So it's a fun exercise.
Yeah. Well, should we, you know what we're going to do? We're going to probably end right now with Hot Rod being our celebrated winner. Mm-hmm. And then we're probably going to put these mics down and we're going to record our Culture Boys episode after this for this month. And we are going to come up with maybe and reveal what we're doing next. So
that sounds like a great idea.
In 2 weeks, just listen, you'll figure out what we're doing. If you ever want us to do specific movies, you can definitely get us to do that by emailing us or, finding us on, all of the different social media platforms. But you can always email us at movieversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. And that is movie, the full word, VS moviepodcast@gmail.com. Send us a message and we'll definitely try to take your pairs if we think that they're worth it. And we will see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.
Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus